Okay, everyone. So it has been about a minute. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome to Grow Your Business with Adobe Creative Cloud, Photoshop, Social Media Graphics. My name is Nikki and I am an instructor at the Harrington Library. And today I will be assisted by my chat facilitator and tech support, our wonderful librarian, Caitlin. Please say hi, Caitlin.
Hello.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So some ground rules before we get started. Your mics have been muted on purpose. If you have a program-related question that you would like to ask, please do so in the chat, which can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Your text will only be seen by panelists, not all attendees of the program tonight. Any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this virtual program. We will try to answer the questions as we go along, but there will be time for a Q&A after the lesson is over as well. A recording of this class will also be sent out at a later date if you would like to follow along with the class tonight again. So today we will be covering the basics of creating a graphic for usage on various social media platforms. We will talk a little about the design process and requirements for different platforms, as well as create two different graphics together. This class is designed to be at a beginner level, so no experience is required. However, having a basic working knowledge of some Photoshop tools is helpful, as we will be hopping right into creating our graphics using some of the tools available to us in Photoshop. If you want to follow along with today's class or when the recording is posted, you can get a free 7-day trial of Photoshop through the Adobe website, or currently all 5 of the Plano Public Library locations are offering access to the Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can access Photoshop for free anytime at the library with your library card on our Adobe stations. And we do also have a digital creation space available at both Haggard and Parr libraries. But let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk real briefly about what Photoshop is. So Photoshop is a software used to create and enhance photographs, illustrations, and 3D artwork. Photoshop changes images by altering pixels in 2 ways. The first is by directly rewriting the properties of pixels. This is known as destructive editing, and this is when you take something like the red eye tool or the spot healing tool, and you actually end up changing the information or the data that is stored in that image. The second way that Photoshop edits is indirectly, and this is by overlaying additional information on top of your original image via layers. And this is the type of editing that oftentimes gets referred to as laying transparent sheets on top of each other. So it is actually the type of editing we're going to be focusing on today is called the layer editing. We're not going to be directly affecting the pixels of the original image. And we're not going to be doing any of that destructive editing today. Just a quick overview of our agenda. Again, we're going to cover some design basics at first and what to consider before you begin your design. We are going to spend a majority of our time here today creating content, but I do think it's really important to cover some of these design basics before we just hop into creating our social media graphics, because it is important to have some of these things in mind before you just hop into creating your graphics. So some design basics. First, we have color. So color is a very, very important aspect of your design, and it helps to set a mood and convey emotions. So if you've ever read about color theory, certain colors do convey certain emotions. So for example, the color red tends to convey energy and urgency. Green tends to convey a feeling of wealth and relaxation. Blue can be seen as a trustworthy color and conveys a sense of security. Black is powerful and sleek, and then purple can be soothing and calm. So color is going to be something that from the start you'll want to consider for your business and your brand, and what exactly are you trying to get across to your audience. Color might be able to play a very important role in conveying that to your audience. And the second thing that you're going to want to consider is font. So for web and digital displays, typically you will want to choose a sans serif font, as that translates to a digital screen better than serif fonts, which tend to translate well to print. And if you don't know the difference, here on the left, we have an example of a serif font. And you can see these little red circles here that are highlighting what I just call the little feet on our font. And that's what a serif font is. They end up with these little feet or hooks on the end. And then sans serif is without those little feet or little hooks. So this sans serif font just tends to translate better to our web displays. Another thing that you'll want to think about is composition. So layout is really important, and it does convey messages just like color does. So for example, diagonals and curves in your graphic can draw the viewer's eyes to a certain part of your graphic that you might want to think about the rule of thirds. This is a common photography principle where the image is broken up into a grid, basically, and you lay your subject matter onto the grid lines. Say you might want a symmetrical design. This can help to translate a feeling of strength or peace, or maybe you want to go with a little more asymmetrical design. It tends to be a little more interesting and a little more engaging than a symmetrical design when it's well done, because there's a little more to explore and it can give your audience more to look at without overwhelming them. So another thing you might want to consider is that for the web, clean and crisp layouts tend to attract more engagement and does not tend to overwhelm our viewer quite as much. All right, so what to consider before you begin? So why do quality social media graphics even matter? Well, if you use social media to promote your small business, posts with an image do tend to get more engagement than posts that do not have an image. And this is true across all social media platforms. So think about when you're sitting at home, scrolling on your phone, what are you more likely to stop on? A clean and crisp image with some eye-catching text on it, or a big block of just pure text? Most likely, I know for me, it's going to be the image that tends to draw my attention in. So you also want to think about your brand and all the things that we talked about a little bit earlier. Think about your message and your goals. What are you trying to convey? Who is your audience? And does your target audience even use social media? And if so, how does social media affect their decisions and choices? So is something like a video going to do better than an image for your audience on whatever platform you'll be uploading to? What goals are you trying to achieve? And what image are you trying to display for your brand? This is going to be something that you will want to keep consistent as you're developing your brand. It might change and it might ebb and flow as you learn new things, but you'll definitely want to try to carve out your own aesthetic for your brand, basically. You'll want to go with that in most of your social media graphics. It's really important to be recognizable to your audience. So here on this page, we have listed some of the size requirements for some of the most popular social media platforms. I'm going to sit here on this page for just a few moments while I continue to talk in case you guys wanted to jot down some of these sizes. Again, there is going to be a recording available later, so you can always come back and just pause on this page. Or honestly, these are updated all the time. So if you just do a quick Google search or go directly to the social media site that you'll be uploading to, you should be able to find their current size requirements. And I did want to point out these are listed in pixels because that's actually what we're going to be working with in Photoshop today. All right, before we go ahead and open up Photoshop, do we have any questions in the chat before we get started with our examples?
We do not.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to exit out of our little PowerPoint here. And we're going to go ahead and open up Photoshop, which I actually do not have pins. So I'm just going to type down here Photoshop and open it up right here. And while this is opening up, I did just want to mention there are a plethora of ways to do things and achieve the same results in Photoshop. Today, I am just going to be showing you guys some of the basic tools that I have picked up on and learned through the years. It doesn't mean that I'm showing you the only way that you can achieve these results. And the more that you practice with the software, the more you will learn and pick up on, and you may find new methods to achieve the same results that we'll be working on today. And you might find something that actually works better for your business and your brand. So again, today I'm just going to be sharing some tools that I like to use, and hopefully they'll be useful to you all as well. So we are going to go ahead and click on this button up here in the top left corner, our new file button. And that is going to open up our new document window here. And so this is where we're going to make some essential decisions about our project. And most important is going to be our document size. So we can see that over here in this preset details portion of our new document window. So for our size, we are actually going to be starting with creating an Instagram story post. And the dimensions we need for that is going to be 1080 for our width and 1920 for our height. And like I mentioned earlier, we are going to remain in this pixels. If you drop down, it changes to inches, centimeters, millimeters, but we're staying with pixels because that is what I had on our requirements sheet earlier. So 1080 by 1920 for an Instagram story post. And we are not going to change too much else here. We're going to keep our resolution here at this 300 pixels per inch. An important thing to note, though, when you are making images for the web, we're going to make sure this color mode is on RGB color. This is going to be the way that the image speaks to the monitors is in this RGB color. So that does really well with our digital displays. If we click on here, we see other options. Another one you might end up working in is the CMYK. That's a really good color mode to work in if you are going to be printing your end product, because those are the colors that a printer uses to communicate with your image, basically is cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K is actually black. I believe it's called key. So that's for printing, but we're intending our images and our final product today to stay on the web and be viewed on a monitor. So we're going to stay in that RGB color mode. And then here, your Photoshop might have defaulted to 8-bit. I know that is what mine has defaulted to before, but we are going to actually want to work in 16-bit. So if you don't have 16-bit selected there, go ahead and click on that drop-down menu and select 16-bit. And this is actually because 8-bit files only have 256 levels of color per channel, whereas just bumping it up to the 16-bit gives us 65,536 levels per channel. So that gives us a lot of editing headroom and really will make our colors a lot more rich. 32-bit is used for like high dynamic range images. And honestly, for our social media graphics, just the 16-bit will work just fine. So up here, we are going to go ahead and title our document before we create it. I'm going to go ahead and just call this IG story, because that is going to be what it ends up being. And before I click down here on create, I did want to show you guys, if you will be making a lot of images for your Instagram story and you want to save all of these options so that you don't have to come in and change them every time, you can do that by clicking on this button right up here. It's this little arrow that looks like it's going down into a box. So if I click on that, it gives us the option to save all of those things we changed into a document preset. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, I'm just going to title this IG story and then save that preset. And we can see here now when I go to saved, it will be right here. So whenever I create a new file, I can always come into here and select this so that we can fill out everything just like this. And we'll go ahead and press create. All right, so now we have our blank canvas here ready for us to begin crafting our Instagram story. So let's go ahead and import a background image. So there are a couple different ways that you can do this, and I'm going to show you guys by coming up here to our file on our menu bar up here, and then going to open. And then from there, we are going to navigate to wherever we have our files saved here, which I do believe Caitlin already dropped our exercise files into the chat for you. So you should be able to save those. They're probably saved in your downloads folder. So go ahead and navigate to that file. And I'm going to choose this one right here, this IG story _ option 1. I'm just going to double click on it. And we can see that actually opened it up in a separate little tab here. So if I come back to our IG story, I still have my blank canvas, and it opened that image up in its own little tab here. So what we actually need to do is basically drag and drop this image onto our canvas. So there's a couple ways you can do that. First, let me show you guys this way, which is by coming down into our layers panel and then clicking on where it says background and dragging that over and up to our tab up here. And so that takes us to our blank canvas where we can then drop it right here onto our blank canvas. And I'm just going to press yes here. That's just basically letting us know that the sizes are a little bit different. So now we have it here and we can see it isn't quite filling up our canvas the way that I would expect it to. I'm going to choose our move tool up here, or if you like to use keyboard shortcuts, you can just use the letter V to select our move tool. And I can move it around and we can see that we can move it all around our canvas. But since it's not the same size, it's not taking up all of our canvas. So we actually want to go ahead and use our free transform tool. There are two ways to get to that tool. We can either do edit and free transform right here, or I tend to just like to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control T for free transform. And that gives us our blue square around our image, and we can now click and drag to change our image size. So I'm going to do that until it's taking up all of our canvas, and then I'm just going to kind of move it around until it's at a spot where I kind of like it. And I think that looks pretty good. So we'll go with that placement for now. We might end up changing that, but we'll go with that for now. And what we're going to do over here, actually, before I show you guys that, let me show you the other way that you can drag in your image. So if you didn't like the option of clicking and dragging here, we can actually come up here to this window option and choose arrange, and then to tile. And there's a bunch of different ways you can tile your tabs. I'm just going to say tile horizontally for now. And if this was still our blank canvas, I could just click right here and drag it straight into there. So if that's a little easier for you to maneuver, you can also do this tile motion. I actually don't need this image anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and just close that tab to get us back to our view here. So let's go ahead and we are going to, just to keep ourselves organized, double click where it says layer 1 in our layer panel here. And we are going to rename this layer cookies. So we know that is our layer that has our image of our cookies. So before I add some text to my post, I think what I want to do is lower the opacity on this layer just a little bit so that it doesn't stand out quite as much when I add text on the top. Our background's pretty busy. We have lots of cookies and some bright reds here. So I just kind of want to tone it down a little bit. And I'm going to try to do that first with our opacity. So making sure that our cookies layer is selected over here. I'm going to come right above it. We can see there is this option for opacity, and there's two different ways we can change opacity. So if we click straight in and highlight the number, I can then use the up and down arrows on my keyboard to bring our opacity down and up. So I think you can see it changing like that. Or we can also just type in whatever we want our percentage to be. And I think I want mine to be 65%. So I typed that in and pressed enter, and I think that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and talk about adding our text layer. Now that we've kind of toned down our background image just a little bit, or actually, you know what, before we add in our text layer, what we're going to do is we're going to play with our colors that are currently in our background image. So we did talk about the importance of color earlier, and that's something that we want to consider in this scenario. So for this scenario, we have a bakery and we're doing a holiday sale, which I know right now it's the middle of summer, so that might seem a little weird. But with your small business, it's always a really good idea to be planning in advance. So planning for a holiday sale in June is really maybe not all that weird, especially with Christmas in July. I know there are a lot of places that have programs like that coming up. So let's say we're going to be planning for something like that. And we kind of want to make this image feel a little more cheery and maybe play with some of our colors that are already currently existing. So the way we are going to do that, we're again going to make sure that our cookies layer is selected. And then right up here, we have an adjustments panel. And we have all of these different adjustments that are available to us. We're going to come down to this last row and the second one from the right. It is called a selective color adjustment layer. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then we can see down here that it has created a selective color layer for us and that it is linked to the layer right below it. So what we're going to do is we can focus on tones with this selective color layer adjustment. So up here in the properties panel, we can see where it says colors. And right now I do have red selected. You could select something like blacks, and you can mess with the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black values of anything that is showing as black here. But we're actually going to stick with reds. We want to play with some of the red colors that we have here. So first, we have a slider here. So I'm going to just slide and bring our cyan down, which We don't actually have a whole lot of blue values in this photo, so that's really not doing too much for us. I think if I go all the way up here, you guys can see it takes out some of those blues and kind of makes it a little more red if I go all the way down here. I actually don't think cyan is the value that we're wanting to play with here. So down here, we have a reset button. It's this little backwards looking arrow. And so if we click that, it will reset all of these to the default. So we're going to go ahead and reset to the default. And this time, let's play with our magentas and see what that looks like. So we're going to bump up our values to right about there. And this little eyeball right here, if I toggle it off, it will show us what it looked like before we made those adjustments. And then I can toggle it back on, and then you can see what it looks like with the adjustments. So that's an easy way to go between your original and then with your layer. So I think I like that little bit of a change. It brought those reds out. It feels a little more like a warm image and not so faded out, but we still have that opaque tendency to it. So I think we're going to go ahead and stick with that. And I'm also going to zoom in just a little bit for you guys, because I know it might be a little smaller on the Zoom screen. So hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. Before we move on to adding our text here to our Instagram story, did we have any questions in the chat?
Not at this time.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about adding text to our image. So we're trying to promote our holiday sale, so we need to have some kind of text on here. Our audience is not going to know just by our lovely image of cookies here that we're having a holiday sale. So let's add our text on. And we want to say something along the lines of holiday sale, every order 25% off until the end of the year. So to do that, we need to choose our horizontal text tool, which is over here in our tool panel about almost close to the end here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Again, if you like keyboard shortcuts, it tells us when we hover over it that it is the letter T if you wanted to use the keyboard shortcut. But I have it selected, and then we're going to go ahead and just click and drag to create a text box here. And when we do that, it has inserted some text for us, and it actually is the font style that I wanted. So there's two places that you can see all of the information about your text box, either over here on our right-hand side in this little properties panel, or also up top here. There is this little ribbon right below our menu bar, and we can see our options up here as well. So these changes are going to be the same as changes we make over here. It's just a matter of where you like to work in. So we are actually going to stay with this freestyle script because I want this first little bit to be our text that says, oh, and I forget Photoshop does like to give us this little bit of text. So we're going to go ahead and delete all of that. Oh, goodness. Okay, there we go. Oh, maybe not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we got rid of all of that text that Photoshop likes to lay in there for us. And we're going to go ahead and type in holiday sale. Okay. And I actually want that all to be on one line. So what I'm going to do is if you hover over this little box here, we can drag it out and make our text box a little longer so that it will all fit on the same line here. And this is the text that I want, or the font that I want to use, the freestyle script. You can see other font options here. If you click on this little drop down arrow, Adobe has a ton of fonts that are available to you. We're just going to stick with that freestyle script though that we had. And I actually think I like the size. So it's at 60-point font right now. I think I like that. It looks pretty good. However, I do not like the blue that it currently has on. That does not feel very holiday-y to me. So we're going to go ahead and change that. So I'm going to select our text that we have. And then here where it says color, double click there, and we can open up our color selector here or our color picker, and you can slide through the color spectrum over here and choose whatever color you would like for your text to be. And you can see a display here of what it's going to look like. We can also see it changing here. I'm actually just going to make it white, and it's going to look a little scary at first because it kind of blends in with our background image with it being white right now. But we are going to end up adding a opaque text box to go behind our text. But let's go ahead and add our second line of text, and then we'll go ahead and add that opaque text box. So I want to add another layer of text. So I'm just going to come down here and put in a new text box. So just clicking and dragging. I'm going to remember to backspace first to get rid of all of that text. And down here is where we are going to type 25% off all orders. Oh, and this is quite large. Let's go ahead and we want this to be a little smaller below our holiday sale graphic. So let's go ahead and make this, let's start off with a 24 point. So that's much smaller. That looks good. So 25% off all sales until 12/31 is what we are going to say there. And I do actually want to change the font style here as well. I don't want it to be that freestyle script since it's going to be a little smaller. I want it to be a little more legible. So we're actually going to change this here to Myriad Pro. And I just want, we'll do a good, ooh, no, I don't like that actually. We're going to do Myriad Pro regular. And that's still quite large for me. I think we're going to actually move this down to 20-point font. That looks a little bit better. And let's see, I want this to be on the second line. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And what we can do, because I actually want this text to align on the right-hand side of our text box here. So I just selected all of it. And over here, we have our paragraph options, just like you would have in Word. And we're going to align it with the right-hand side of our text box. So I'm going to go ahead and click off real quick so we can see now that I have those two text layers. But like I mentioned earlier, since we chose white for our font, we're going to have to put an opaque text box behind here. And I actually think that's going to look really good. We're going to add a little bit of contrast here to our image with that. So let's go ahead and add on a text box. So the way we're going to do that is by selecting our rectangle tool over here in our toolbar, or we can use the letter U. So I have that selected. I'm going to just click and drag on my image to where it might lay behind our text box. Oh, and so I've actually ended up putting it, I did not realize that I had a layer down here selected that I did not intend to. So it actually ended up as a layer, our rectangle layer is now in between our holiday sale and our 25% off sales. So it's laying below the 25% off text, which is why we can see that on top of our layer here. But we actually want it to lay below our holiday sale as well. So we can see the holiday sale text here on top. So over here in our layers panel, I'm just going to click on that rectangle one panel or layer, I'm sorry, and drag it here below and drop it below the holiday sale. So that brings that layer below our two text layers here so that they'll lay on top of our rectangle. But I think we decided earlier we don't like this blue color. So we are not wanting to stick with our blue color here. We actually want to make it, let's do something a little more festive. Let's go with a green. I think that will work. So I'm going to change it to a green background, but we want it to be opaque. We don't want it to be quite so solid. I think it's a little jarring to the visuals and we lose all of our cookies under there. So with our rectangle layer selected here, we're going to go ahead and change our opacity again. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. So we can make it pretty opaque to where it's honestly almost transparent. I don't quite like that. I think I liked it right up here. Around about 35, 36. There we go. I think right there at 39. It looks pretty good to me. So just looking at the layout right now, the way it is laying right here and it's right in the corner of this bow, I actually don't like. I want to move this all down just a little bit. Everything seems kind of bunched up right here. So let's go ahead and we're going to target our 25% off text, and we're just going to move that down some. And we're going to move our holiday sale down some, and then we're going to click on this layer and move that down a little bit. Okay, and that looks pretty good to me, but our box is a little large. So let's go ahead and we're going to change our box size, which with the transform tool, it does default to proportionally changing everything. So you can see here, even though I'm only clicking and dragging on this bottom line, it's actually proportionally changing the whole box. It's not just bringing the box up. If we want to disproportionately change, you can do that with the free transform tool. You just have to press shift and then drag whichever side you were wanting to change. So when I do that, I can press shift and we'll see it will only drag this top bit, or I'm going to make that pretty tight, and then we can bring this bottom bit up as well. And again, that's just by holding shift and then clicking on the side you're wanting to alter and dragging. So I think that looks pretty good. Real quickly, let me talk about, so we have this all arranged how we want. Let's say that I just want to take this and move it up, but I don't want to move all these elements individually. I want them all to move at the same time. We can accomplish that by linking our layers. So to link our layers, all we need to do is come over here into our layers panel. I'm going to right click and actually, sorry, not right. We need to select all the layers that we want to link first. So I'm going to click on that 25% off sales, which is up top. And I want that to be linked with holiday sale and then also with our layer with the rectangle. So I'm going to hold shift and then click down here at the bottom, and that's going to select all three of these. If your layers were not all in a row, you could also press control, and that will allow you to select layers that may not be directly next to each other. But we want these three, so we have them all selected, and now we can right click and click right here on Link Layers. And when I do that, once I have my move tool selected, it is going to move everything all as one. It's linked all of those layers together, and we can move that wherever we'd like, which I am going to move it up just a little bit. There we go. And when it's all linked, also if we're going to end up transforming anything and changing the size of anything, that's all going to move together as well now. So just a quick note on that. And if we needed to unlink, so let's say we, for some reason, want to move the holiday sale up, we can come in here at any time and we can just select whichever one we're wanting to unlink. And you just right click on the layer and click Unlink Layers. So I'm going to do that real quickly to unlink all of this. There we go. And it is all unlinked. So I think that looks pretty good. Oh, one more thing, actually, I wanted to point out to you guys here on this rectangle layer. When I don't have it selected, I'm not sure how well you guys can see it on Zoom, but it looks almost like there is a bit of a border here along the edge of our rectangle. And we can change that. We can make it thicker or we can make it thinner. And I wanted to show you guys how to do that real quickly. So again, I'm going to click on our rectangle layer. And when we do that, here under our properties panel and under appearance, there is this option for stroke. And that is basically the outside border of this shape that we have created. Right now it's at 1 pixel. I'm going to put it down to 0 and press enter and then click off. And again, I don't know how well you guys can see it on Zoom, but that kind of took away that little bit of a border it looked like we had because I put it down to 0. If I want to, let me show it to you guys really exaggerated. So we're actually going to, let's bump it up to, I don't know, like 100. So there we go. So you can see that kind of created that border here because we bumped the stroke or the outside of this shape up. So again, I don't want there to be like any border. So I'm going to put it back down to the 0 pixels. And yeah, I think that looks nice and clean. So let's go ahead, and I'm okay with this image. I think this will work perfectly for an Instagram story post. It's simple, to the point, and has a nice little image that would hopefully draw in our audience. So now we are ready to export. So up here in our menu bar, we're going to go to File, If you went to File, Save As, which might be what you're used to doing with most of your documents, it's actually only going to save it as a Photoshop file, which is great if you're intending to come back and maybe edit this a little bit more. If you're not finished and you just need to come back and work on it later, then you can save it as a Photoshop document that you can come back in and make changes to later. But we actually want to export it as a JPEG so that we can upload it to Instagram. But if you can see, that's actually not an option here. And that is because we actually are not going to do file save as. What we're going to do is file and export, and then export as. And that is going to bring up our export window. So here we have some different options. The first one that we're going to want to change is this one up here. It currently is saving as a PNG file. We are going to want to choose the JPEG. It's a pretty universally well-known file type, and it works on pretty much all the social media websites that you might be uploading to. Here for quality, it has a little slider. You can slide it down to low quality. And when we slide it down to low, if you'll see over here, it changes our file size. So right now it's about 80 kilobytes. If we bump it all the way up to the highest quality, it makes it 1.1 megabytes. So upping the quality is going to increase your file size. So depending on where you're uploading this, if there are file size restrictions, this might be something that you have to play around with to get it where you need it to be. I think I typically just export mine here on this 6, so almost the highest quality, but not quite up there. It reduces our file size honestly drastically just from that 6 to the 7. So I'm going to keep it here at 6. That's still fairly good quality. We can see here all of our dimensions are still correct. And we are going to go ahead and just press export now. So when you press export, this will give you the option to choose where you want to save the image that we just created. So I'm going to keep it here in our exercise files, and I'm just going to keep it named what we had started out with, which was IG story. I'm going to go ahead and press save. And once we do that, since this isn't a very large image, it did not take very long. It has already exported. So let me show you guys where it is. So I'm going to minimize Photoshop and come in here to my folder that I saved it in, which is right here in my project folder. And we can see right here, I can double click and it'll open up right here. So that's the image that we just created, and we are ready to put over into Instagram now. So that was our first image that we were going to work on. Before we move on to creating our second image, do we have any questions that popped up in our chat?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. All right, just one moment here, guys. Okay, so for our second image, we're going to work on creating a Facebook banner. So we need to create a new blank canvas because our Facebook banner size requirements are much different from our Instagram story size requirements. So since we already have Photoshop open, we're going to come up here to our file, and we are going to press new. And that's going to bring up our new document window. Just like when we opened up Photoshop originally and we clicked the blue button up here, this is the same thing. We're just starting from another project. So we are going to go ahead and mess with our dimensions over here. So for our Facebook banner, we need the width to be 820 and the height to be 312. And then, yep, we're going to keep this all the same, just like we talked about earlier. I am going to go ahead and save this. Let's say that we can see ourselves updating our Facebook banner many times in the future. So we're going to go ahead and save this preset, and I'm going to save it as Facebook banner. And then let's go ahead and title our document today. And yeah, I'm just going to name it Facebook banner for now. You can name it whatever you'd like. And I'm going to press create. Okay, so to keep myself organized, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this IG story since we're done with that project. We just saved our changes, so I'm going to say no, I don't need to save my changes. Okay, so now we have our blank canvas here for our Facebook banner. And just like with our Instagram story, we're going to want to start by importing our images. So for our Facebook banner, I'm actually going to have, I believe it's 4 or 5 different images that we are going to end up using here. So we're going to actually import all those at once and move them all over. So a little different from our first graphic where we only had one image we were working at or working with. So I'm going to come up here again to File, Open. Let it know it's on my computer. And we're wanting to open all of these here from bread logo down to Facebook cover 3. So I'm just going to click and drag and select everything that I'm wanting to open and come down here and click open. Yes, I'm going to say okay. And so just like with our first image, those all opened up in separate tabs here. So I am first going to bring in what's going to be our main background image, which is this one right here, this little image of some biscuits covered in chocolate. So just like with our first graphic, I'm going to go ahead and click on the background here in our layers panel and just drag it over here to our blank canvas and drop it in. I'm going to say yes. And as we can see, that was a huge photo. It is taking up a lot more than just our small Facebook banner here. So we need to, once again, just come in and mess with our image size. So I'm going to do that and get this down to a little smaller and then arrange it on my canvas. And a lot of this, you guys, is just up to, you know, your own eyeballs and what you think looks good, what you think will work for your brand. So there's not a whole lot of science to this. I'm just going to kind of place it where I think it looks good. And I think that looks pretty good for now. That's what we're going to start with. Again, we may come back and end up moving this around, but I think that looks pretty good. So what we're actually going to do with our Facebook banner is we're going to work on creating some layer masks. So to start out with, what I want is to have the top half of my image blank, basically, so that I can go ahead and insert maybe a logo and some other images and eventually some text, but I don't want that to be inserted on top of our image here. So what we're going to do is create a layer mask. And first, we need to know what's 50% of this image. If I want the top half to be blank, how do I figure out what the top 50% of this image is? So there's a really easy way to do this in Photoshop. And real quickly, I am again gonna zoom in here to make this a little bigger for you guys, because I know on Zoom it might be kind of hard to see. But the way we're gonna do that is actually here under View and then New Guide. Sorry, you guys. There we go. New guide. I'm going to click here on new guide, and Photoshop will create a guide for us. So it gives us the options of a vertical guide or a horizontal guide. And we're wanting to clear up the top 50% of our image. So we're going to choose horizontal. And it defaults here to pixels, but we can actually just type in 50% and press OK. And then it has laid down this blue guide for us. So it has actually cut our image directly in half. So 50% of the image is up here and 50% of the image is down here. So now what we're going to do is we want to mask this upper portion so that we can't see our image here below. And before I start doing that, I'm going to rename this layer so that we know this is our cookies layer. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and now to create our mask, what we need to have selected is our rectangular marquee tool. And that can be found, it's actually the second from the top tool up here. Right now it has the elliptical marquee tool selected, but if you click and hold on the tools, it will pop out the additional options for that tool. And I'm going to select this rectangular marquee tool because that's the one we're wanting to use. So going to select that, and it now has our rectangular marquee tool selected. And so I'm now going to come to the top corner of my image and drag our rectangular marquee out. And you can drag it as far down as you'd like, but again, I'm wanting to snap it to our grid so that we're covering that top half. So now you can see we have our dotted moving line around the top half of our image here. So now we're going to want to go ahead and make it a layer mask. And the way that we are going to do that is by coming up to layer, layer mask. And then we are going to select the hide selection option. And when we do that, we can see here it's created a mask and it's basically hiding what is below it. So we can see the image here, but it has hidden this upper part. And over here in our layers panel, we can see that mask here. So if you'll see now next to our cookies image, it has this little chain link, and right next to it, it is showing us our mask. Again, I'm not sure how well y'all can see this on Zoom, but you can see the top half of the mask is black. That is the part that you can't see through. And the bottom half is white. So that portion you can see through. So we have our mask up here now. What we can do, let me show you guys. If I select our move tool and begin to move this around, when I lay that mask down, it lays it basically into that layer and they're going to move together. And that's because they're linked. So say that we have our mask down and we decide we don't like what is showing down here. Maybe we want to move this up or down a little bit, resize it now that we know that we're going to have some other images up here. So the way we can do that is between the two in the layer panel here, we're going to click on that little chain link. It's going to disappear. And now depending on what you have selected, you can either have the layer, the mask layer targeted, or your original image targeted. Whichever one is targeted is going to be what ends up able to move. So our mask layer is staying in place, and we are now able to move this and find whatever position we would like. But what we are actually going to do is we're going to target our layer mask. And we're going to move that layer mask over a little bit so that we have something that looks a bit like this. And this is actually going to be where we're going to end up putting our logo. And I'm going to show you guys how to use another layer mask to kind of do like a porthole almost that we can see through to see some other images. And so again, this is just a design choice. I'm just going to kind of lay it, I think right about there. Looks pretty good to me. And before we continue, I no longer need this guide. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. The way we can do that is coming up here to view, and where it says extras, just click that little box and it's going to take away all of our extra little guides that we have. So now we have a clearer canvas to work with. Before I move on and start adding in our other images, did we have any questions in the chat?
Not at this time. You're doing great.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. All right. So, oh, one thing I forgot to mention. So when we lay this down, I don't know if you can tell. Let me zoom in just a little more for you guys. I think hopefully you guys can see that pretty well. But this layer mask, it has a pretty sharp edge. It doesn't really blend well with what is behind it. So making sure that my layer mask is targeted over here. Up here in our properties panel, we have a couple of options. And the second one is for a feather. So we're actually going to do that to kind of soften our mask edges. So I'm first going to do it really dramatic for you guys to show you what a really heavy feather might look like. It actually took it mostly away. So if you do a really heavy feather, it will really feather those edges out. You can see it's definitely not a sharp edge anymore. It's a very blurry edge. We actually don't want it to be feathered quite that much. We still want to be able to see the rectangle. Yeah, kind of like that. I think that looks good. And just like when I was showing you with the color selection or the selective color mask on our first image, down here we can click on this little eyeball and it's going to take away our layer real quick. And I'm just going to play with this feathering until it gets to a point that I kind of like, because yeah, really hard edges and a little softer, which I think that looks pretty good. We don't want it to be too blurry. So right here at 1.5 pixels is what we're going to settle on. So let's see. Now we're going to go ahead and we had some other images up here. Let's go ahead and drag those all in because we're basically going to lay those images down now in this little blank portion that we've created for ourselves here. So to do that quickly, I'm going to come up here to Window and Arrange. And this time I'm going to tile them all vertically. So I can now see all of my options here and all of my different tabs. I've already used this one, so I'm going to close this one real quickly, but we still need to drag these 3 images over. So I'm first going to click on this Facebook cover 3, click on the background and drag it over here and drop it. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to close it out because now I don't need it. And I'm just going to do that with my remaining 2 tabs. So click and drag background and drop it into the appropriate tab over here. Press yes, and then exit out. And then this is our last one, our little bread logo. So click on that tab, select the layer here, click and drag it in and say yes. And then I'm going to close this one out. And no, I don't want to save my changes. So this now looks kind of crazy. It looks like we have completely messed up everything that we have worked on, but we haven't. So right here next to our layers, just like with our adjustment layers before, we have these little eyeballs. So when I toggle the eyeballs on or off, it toggles the visibility of the layer. So when they're not there, you can no longer see those layers. So if I toggle it back on, now I can see this layer here. And for organization's sake, before we get too far, I'm going to name all of these layers so that we can keep them organized. So this is our bread logo. See, the second one is our jelly cookies. And then this last one is our chocolate cookie. I'm just naming all of these because if we end up moving these layers around and you don't have them labeled properly, sometimes you can get quite confused. I know I have done that to myself many a time. So we want to work with these just one at a time. So I'm actually going to go ahead and toggle off the jelly cookies layer and the chocolate cookies layer because I just want to work with this bread logo layer right now. So I'm going to click that. And then I am going to use the keyboard shortcut Control T because I am wanting to transform this because our logo is humongous, way too big for our current image size. So when I press Control T, it brought up our blue box here. And we can go ahead and just drag our corners to change our image size here. So I'm going to do that and get it down to a size that I think looks good. Something not too big. My vision for this is going to be that we'll have a logo here. We're going to have those portholes that I'm going to show you guys how to create with another layer mask in just a second. That's going to show some other baked goods back behind here. And then we're going to end up putting some text over here. So I think this is a fairly decent size, and we can always come back and change that, but I think that looks good. So we're going to keep that like that. And now what we want to do, we are going to toggle on, we'll start with our chocolate cookies layer. So I'm going to toggle on the visibility there. And we can see it's very big. So we need to Control T and make sure it's selected. That's an important thing with Photoshop, you guys. Make sure whatever layer it is that you're trying to make changes to, you have selected here in the layers panel. Because when I just did Control T, I had nothing selected, so it did not bring anything up. But as long as I have my chocolate cookies selected, I can do Control T. And here we go. We have our options for resizing popping up. So I'm going to resize this image a little bit. It's a fairly large one. And I'm just going to make it quite tiny. And I'm going to toggle my bread logo back on so I can see about where it is, because I'm going to want this cookie to be peeping through our little porthole that I'm going to create here in just 1 second. So I'm just going to lay that down there for now. And you guys, this is going to look a little crazy for just a second before we get our masks back on, but I promise it's going to look a little better in a moment. So let's go ahead and we're going to get our jelly cookies resized and kind of placed where I think they might end up being. Again, a pretty large image here. So we're just working it down decreasing our size. Okay. And we're going to lay it, I think right about there should be okay. We might have to make some minor adjustments, but so what we're going to do now, again, I know it looks kind of crazy right now. It definitely looks overwhelming. There's a lot going on, but we need to get our elliptical layer masks is what we're going to add so we can kind of have those little peek through portholes. So I'm going to, over here in our layers panel, I'm going to start with our jelly cookies. So I'm going to toggle to that layer. And just like we did our rectangular marquee tool earlier for creating this layer mask, we're actually going to click and hold, and we're going to select our elliptical marquee tool because we are now wanting to make more of an elliptical shape. I'm just going to click and drag and create a circle about that big. Looks pretty good to me. So we now have this little selection here, and just like we did before, we're going to come up to layer, come down to layer mask. And this time, instead of hide selection, which would hide whatever is inside of this circle, we are actually going to select reveal selection because we want to reveal everything inside the circle and hide everything outside of the circle. So we'll click here on reveal selection. And that gives us that little kind of porthole that I was talking about. So just like with the mask we created before, if I select my move tool, those are going to move at first together. But let's say, although actually I kind of like the portion of the picture that's showing, but we're going to move it around just a little bit. So first I'm going to get my layer mask. I think right there looks pretty good. And let's say that we actually want to mess with our image size again and maybe get a few more cookies into this little porthole. So over here on our jelly cookies layer, I am going to unlink them real quickly, and I'm going to select the image, not the mask. So I'm going to select our image here, and now I can go ahead and move that around. So let's just make it a little smaller. Let's say we want a few more cookies showing through our little hole here. And I think that looks pretty good. Just like how we feathered the edges here for this layer mask, we're going to do that here as well. Nothing too crazy with this one though, because it's quite small. So we're just going to feather it like 0.6. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that change on Zoom, but it made it just a little less intense where our outline of our circle is. So I quite like that. I'm going to come back here to our jelly cookies layer and relink those two so that now if I was to select them, they're going to move together again since I already like where I've got it. If I need to move the circle or our mask around, I can do that and not worry about my cookies moving. And that made me remember I never relinked these two. So I'm going to relink those because I don't want that moving at all either. Okay, so let's go ahead, and what we want to do now is we want to create another layer mask here that's going to lay right here and will show a portion of this cookie, just like this. And so an easy way to do that is going to be to copy this layer mask. And so the way we can actually do that is coming over here into our layers panel, making sure you have that mask from the jelly cookies, the one that we're wanting to copy. Make sure you have it selected or targeted. We're going to press Alt on the keyboard and then drag that down to our chocolate cookies layer. And so now you can see here on our chocolate cookies layer, we have a mask just like we have here on our jelly cookies. And real quickly, I'm going to toggle our visibility off of all of these other layers. And it looks kind of crazy right now, but here on this chocolate cookies layer, if I press Alt and click on the layer mask, it changes our view to where I can now see where my mask is. So this is all of the portion that's being hidden, and this is the only portion that is being revealed. So this is all that we can see through right now. And we are actually going to want to move that because remember our chocolate cookie image is over here. So we need our mask to be over here. So I'm going to click in between the two to unlink them. I'm going to make sure my mask is selected here, and I'm going to move it over here. ish. That should be where our cookie is. And we're going to go ahead and once I click on to toggle our visibility on here, I can now see where the selection that's being revealed. I think that looks pretty good. So we're going to go with that. I'm going to toggle these all back on so I can see the whole thing together. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and I like what's being shown here. I'm not going to mess with the image size or anything of that chocolate cookie. So I'm just going to relink the image with the mask. And then I'm going to move this just a little bit and rearrange these a little bit so they're a little more even. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good for now. So we're going to add a little text here, and that will be the kind of finishing step here to our Facebook banner. I think we have a little more time left. Before I add some text in here, did we have any questions in the chat about any of these masks or these layer masks that we've created?
Not at this time.
Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and we're going to add some text. And I want it to be on top of all my layers. So I'm just going to select this top one, which happens to be my bread logo. And I'm going to come over here back to our text or horizontal type tool. Click on that. And just like we did before, click and drag to create a little text box. And okay, let's see if this is, let's change our font color. I know we had changed our font color earlier. Let's go back to black. There we go. Aha. Okay. So I made the fatal mistake again, you guys, of not erasing all of our text. So I'm actually going to real quickly click in there and backspace, and we are going to type, let's see, I didn't think of a bakery name. We're just going to type in Plano Sweets. For our text layers, we're going to highlight and do Plano Sweets here too as well. So make this a little bit bigger. Oh no, that is not what I meant to do. Let's make this bigger. Let's change our font size. We're going to put it down to about 11. And this is all, we're just going to kind of play with it until we like what it looks like. So let me first, oh, we have some more text over here, you guys. Clearly me and the text tool are not being the best of friends today. I think there's definitely an easier way to select all the remaining text, and I am blanking on how to do it right now. So sorry, guys. We're going to do it the slow way. My apologies. Okay. There we go. We've got it narrowed down to just the text that we want now. Target this again, and let's see. So I really don't like that font. Let's maybe go back to our freestyle script so we can kind of stay with a similar look as our last graphic. We're going to change the color to, I think actually we're going to keep it black. I think I like the black actually. And then we're just going to move it around a little bit. We'll say right about there. I actually think we're going to bump up our font size a little bit. No, too big. We'll go to maybe 24. That's still too big. All right, let's try 22. All right, we're going to stick with 20, guys. Oh, I did something. Okay, we're going to stick with 20. That's going to have to do. I think that looks a little bit better. There we go. So we'll have Plano Sweets, and then we're going to just put another little text box and insert insert some contact information, because this is our Facebook banner, so we want to be easily recognizable. So do another little text box. I'm going to remember to erase all of that text first. And then we're just going to move our text box up, and I'm now going to write in, oh no, come back. our text, which let me pull this up. Okay, and we're going to type, I actually don't know a number. We're going to type in 999. Oh, and now it's not cooperating with me. So real quickly, you guys, I'm just going to delete that. And we're going to try to re-add it back in since it was not cooperating. In a backspace, type in our number, which I'm just going to type 999, 999, 9999. We're going to make our text box bigger, and then we're going to move that up some. Oops. There we go. And I'm just going to resize by doing that. Okay. And so there we go. So there's a little Facebook banner. If I'm being completely honest, you guys, this is not my most favorite thing I've ever created. I think it looks a little overwhelming. If I was doing this, I probably would not include these little portholes, but I really wanted to show you guys some of the options you have available to you with the layer masks. So in the end, I think I would probably end up removing these from my design and just having my logo a little bit bigger and my contact information here. And that's okay. Whenever you're going through your design, if you get this far in the process and you decide, wow, I really don't like what I've created, you can always toggle things off and play with it. And then you can always delete these layers. If you just decide you really don't like it, you can end up deleting these and just working with this until you get what you like. So I think for now, I'm going to toggle those back on, though, just so we can see all the work that we've put into it. So this is our Facebook banner, and it's ready to be exported just like our Instagram story. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So again, just so we see that process, we're going to come up here to File, Export, and Export As. And it saved our options from last time, it looks like. So it kept our JPEG. We're at a fairly high quality. We've got all of this is correct. So we'll go ahead and press Export. And yep, I'm just going to save it the same folder and keep the name Facebook banner. So I'm going to press Save. We're going to come out of Photoshop and we'll view that one more time. So here it is in my folder right here. And there it is. She's ready to be uploaded to Facebook as my banner photo. So I think that is all I had for us today. While I get our PowerPoint pulled back up because we have some additional resources I'd like to share with you guys. Did we have any questions that happened to pop up throughout my lesson?
Not at this time.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Caitlin, for helping us out tonight. And thank you everyone for joining us. We do appreciate you being here. I would like to remind you about some of the wonderful courses you have access to through LinkedIn Learning with your library card. I have just a few listed here. One that I have taken, it is about 10 hours long, so it's a pretty lengthy training, but it's really great, goes into depth about some of the things I talked about today, as well as some other concepts and things you can do in Photoshop. And it's this Photoshop 2022 Essential Training. I think we have a link that Caitlin is going to drop into our chat for you guys. There's also these other two that kind of talk a little more about social media marketing for your small business, and these were both great courses as well. So those you have access to with your library card. And we do also have our Plano Library YouTube channel. This course is going to be up there in just a few days, so you can watch through again. But we have some of these other really great courses that are applicable to small businesses. We have a Building Your Brand program. We have logo creation with Illustrator and Inkscape if you're looking to create a logo for your small business. And we have more from this series, the Grow Your Business with Adobe Creative Cloud series, available as well. Just a quick reminder, we do have our Plano Library Speaks podcast that comes out every month. So if you're curious and wanted to listen to that, you can get to that on our webpage. We have a little link down here as well that you can follow. And then there is also going to be a survey sent out to you guys. It should pop up right after this as well. If you would please fill that out and give us all of your feedback, it really does help us to create better content for you guys. Yeah, so we appreciate it. I guess if we don't have any more questions, we're going to go ahead and end. But thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time.